Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, September 18th. Welcome to the Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting. Call this meeting to order. The first item is Public Services Committee. Councilor Sale, do you have an update?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We did have our meeting last week. We had two things on the agenda. One was an update from the landfill, which was very informative by Dustin Hansen. And then we also talked about natural gas fire pits located downtown, how the ordinance addresses those. We had several people do a great presentation, including Councilors Erickson, Councilor Neitzer, had several people discuss it. And we're going to move forward on refining the ordinances to see whether or not that's something we'd like to do. And then we adjourn the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you for the update and great job on chairing your first committee meeting. Next item is Administration Communications. Welcome, Chief of Staff Beck.
Good afternoon, councilors. A couple of things today. Last week, I touched briefly on an annexation that was going to be brought forward by the Planning and Development Services Department in November, December this year, as well as an informational presentation in regards to annexation and our policy for annexations in October. Following that presentation, Albert Schmidt from the Planning and Development Services Department did let me know that they also have one other annexation that will be brought forward to this group for consideration on October 2nd. And it's a little bit unique in some ways because it's just annexation of right-of-way. So it's annexation of right-of-way in and around the I-29, I-90 interchange, and then also the west side of the interchange at I-90 and Marion Road. So if you have any questions specific to that prior to them bringing that forward on October 2nd, please let Albert know, or you can also talk to Mike Cooper, the director of that department as well. But again, it's just annexation of right-of-way, and then also the city lift station that's located in Foundation Park, just on the northwest side of that I-90, I-29 interchange. Also, a couple of additional items for you. Next month, we'll be bringing forward Parks will an update on the progress of the Levitt Shell construction. That was per a councilor's request. So if you have other requests like that of specific projects, whether it's in Public Works or Parks, please let me know and we'll make sure that we get updates to this group. And then also just requested actually today in early December, a cross-divisional group of our team members coming forward to the fiscal committee to talk about how we utilize grants within the city. So application of grants, administration of grants, what grants we have as a city come forward and been successful at making application for in the past, and where we want to go with those types of opportunities in the future as well. So that will be coming forward to you in early December at the fiscal committee. And then also just one more quick update. I think you've heard several times about this already from Tom Huber, but asset management software, that is something that the city within IT and the finance department have been working very diligently on bringing forward, and they will be probably coming forward within the next month and a half to either an informational meeting or a fiscal committee meeting, just to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what that is and how we see that being rolled out within city as a whole. So that's all I had for today. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Councilor Neitzer.
Another idea, the Cascade Project.
Yes.
I'd like to hear about that at some point.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Thank you for your time. City Council open discussion. Anything for open discussion? Councilor Brecky.
I do. If I could, I'd just like to give you a brief I've got a dream speech. I was so inspired by the mayor's meeting with his staff this week. I wasn't at it because it wasn't appropriate for it to be there. This is his opportunity to rally his team, come up with a vision. At the mayor's directors meeting, I learned that he had done a survey of his employees and had a 52% response, which is amazing. And it just proves that, city employees have a lot of ideas and they want to be heard. And I was just so excited by what he's doing with his team. But what I would say to this council, and this is where I get to the I've got a dream speech, that's only part of what needs to be done. If the mayor gels his team and comes up with a vision and comes up with goals, that's wonderful. That's a huge start for this city, to move this city in a direction. But that's only the mayor and his team. That's only part of the voice that needs to be heard and that needs to set the vision for the future. The other part comes from us, the city council. What our job is to set policy for this city. And that doesn't mean that we just need to accept the mayor's vision with what he's come up with from his staff, because that's just part of the voice of the city. The rest of the voice of the city are our constituents. Each and every one of us, 8 council members, has a constituency that speaks to us, that we listen to. And they bring a lot of voices and a lot of ideas to us. It's our job to listen to them and to come up with a process where we can actually catalog what our interests are and what our vision is for the future, and then we can work together with the mayor to create a vision for the city. And I think you've all heard me talk about long-range strategic planning. I think after this budget cycle, the first thing we need to do is, for ourselves, is to do exactly what the mayor just did with his staff. We need to come up with a process whereby we start to, hear the voices of our people, of our constituents, and put together, our list of ideas. And that's the very beginning of what could ultimately be a merger between the mayor and his staff and us and our vision, speaking on behalf of our constituency and trying to come up with a vision, a solid vision that moves the city forward together as one. And so I just wanted to share that with the council. I was, like I said, particularly inspired what he's doing, but I want to speak particularly to Marshall and to Christine, because you're our leadership. And I would really hope and propose that really after we adopt this budget, we start working on, the council's vision and just beginning that process and coming up with a process to have a process where we start to create that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kiley.
Thank you very much. Just another reminder that the first and second reading of the State Veterans Cemetery is scheduled for Tuesday, October 2nd, and Monday, October 15th, here in the Carnegie. It's been a long time coming, and it's going to happen. And also, the Sanford International Golf Tournament will begin tomorrow with the Pro-Am portion of their tournament, continuing into Thursday. And then the regular tournament with the professionals from the tour will begin Friday, Saturday, and then conclude on Sunday. So that's a great event for the city of Sioux Falls, and it's one that didn't happen just by itself. So my thanks to Sanford and to Minnehaha Country Club and to the many, many sponsors that are making this possible. It's a great event for our city. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other open discussion? I was asked this last Friday to just bring up the budget process for tonight's meeting. So I'm just going to state what we discussed with the mayor during the director's meeting and just make sure everybody's on the same page. We will be reorganizing the agenda for this evening. The appointment of Jason Reisdorfer will be moved to the very front. The budget will then be the item after that. The way that we have done it in the past is that is read and there is public input given on the budget. The other thing is we have made all of, to my knowledge, the amendments are all public, and so any of those public amendments will be available for the public attending. So if they do want to speak during public input, they can address any of those particular amendments one way or another should they want to speak on those items. Time limits still apply unless the mayor does give his deference to allow it to go a little bit longer like he has in the past, and it's worked. That will be the way after each of the amendments are read into, and each one will be voted on separately, and then there'll be an amended main motion. If there's any private amendments, those then are introduced. If there's none, then we will vote on the amended main motion. And so just wanted to make sure we do it once a year, and so we get a little, kind of fly by the seat of our pants sometimes, and so just making sure we're all on the same page for the process of that. If there's any issues with that or questions, feel free to address it with the mayor or the city attorney for tonight's meeting. So just wanted to address that, and there will be ample input given, opportunity to be given by the public for that. Seeing no other open discussion, we'll move on to our first item, the August monthly financial report. Assistant Director Tom Huber, welcome.
Good afternoon. We did produce a little bit different looking beginning to the monthly financial report. It was kind of a quiet month. That's supposed to be kind of humorous with the budget going on, but our team did use their time wisely, and was able to pull together a few adjustments that we hope continues to make improvements to the report, makes it easier to read, trying to be concise and informative, and could probably talk about it being kind of under construction as we are planning to continue to make some improvements, and we'd very much appreciate the feedback as you look through it and you have thoughts or comments or questions. Please send them off to us so that we can continue to make improvements that are good, not only for what we think are good improvements, but what you think are good improvements as well. So looking at some of the economic indicators of the report, starting first with unemployment. Instead of just trending the city, we've actually extended this out a little bit and added the state and national economies to the graphic. As you can see, the Sioux Falls MSA continues to trend down this year, as have the state and national trends. The city MSA remains well below both that of the state and national rates. This is obviously a strong job market. It's good for the local economy, but it does introduce some wage pressures into the market, which the city certainly feels, especially on the, in some of our recruitment of part-time positions, given the low unemployment rate. Looking at building permits, actually remains solid and steady. As you can see, 2018 valuations on the blue bar topped the last 2 years once again at this, running through this time frame. We added another piece to the report, and that is just a quick look at inflation. Inflation has a significant impact on the city's expense side of the budget. It also has some impact on the revenue side of the budget. So it's always good for us to keep in mind what the inflation looks like going forward. So we've introduced both a kind of a short-term look by the bars, which is the August inflation numbers, and then a longer-term trend on inflation on the right with the line chart. We've used this chart in the past from time to time just to indicate some of the bigger term statewide trends to sales tax, and we wanted to reintroduce again and keep it in front of us this time around to look at the bigger statewide where sales tax is going on a statewide basis with some of our peer cities out there and the state as a whole. Our plan isn't necessarily to include this in every report, but more as if you're going to call it a guest speaker or whatever, on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis, just to give us some perspective as to what it looks like from the rest of the state. And you can see that the improved sales tax collections is not just local, it's statewide. We added this table a while back as a staple to our reporting. Though it provides a short-term trend in sales tax, it does give us a good indication of year-over-year improvements and whether those improvements are holding or not. As you can see, in August, year-over-year is up 5.6%. That's basically August of 2018 over August of 2017. So it's worth noting that the pickup in sales tax began in September last year, and that may impact us to some degree in our forward-looking growth. But this chart, in addition to giving us a near-term snapshot, is a good lead-in to really our key metric that we use, and that's the rolling sales tax collections. And you can see we are now up to 4.7% on a 12-month rolling growth rate basis. So we've seen continued improvement in this throughout the year, and believe we will hold a good piece of this forward. Again, this is no guarantee. As I've mentioned before, headwinds can quickly turn, or tailwinds can quickly turn into headwinds, and you don't know what certain things may impact, but the short-term trend is certainly much improved over what we saw coming into the end of the beginning of 17. Looking at revenues overall, you can see that we are basically 3% on a revenue basis ahead of last year. Again, sales and property tax account for a good share of that overage from last year, but licenses and permits are also factoring in at this time. City sold 2 liquor licenses in July, and that has a rather significant impact in that category, as well as building permits remain strong. Lastly is the look at expenditures. One of the factors on the expenditure side, you can see that we're 4% over this time of last year. And the major reason for that is that August this year was a 3 pay period month versus last year that 3 pay period month was in September. So those will affect, the timing of those 2 extra payrolls. We're on a 26 payroll period cycle. The timing of those will sometimes affect our expenditures. And we've talked about the spring snow and ice season and the impact that had on the highways and streets budget in the past. So with that, I'll end the part of the presentation and open up for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Tom? You did such a great job. Doesn't look like there's any questions. Thank you, Tom, for your time and energy and accommodating suggestions as we've moved forward with some of these items. Next up is Village on the River Development Update. Welcome, Matt Nelson, Public Parking Facilities Manager.
Matt Nelson, Public Parking Facilities Manager. Today I'm going to give you an update on the mixed-use parking ramp, which is the Village on the River project. That is the title that we have on it now. We're good. It's changing. So just a brief overview of the scope of the project. And this slide should look familiar. There are some items on it that have changed, and I'm going to talk about those items that have changed. First of all, on the public side, nothing's changed. The size of the ramp is the same. The project cost is the same. So we have not changed a lot. But on the private side, the scope of the project has changed. You'll see that the investment on the private side has increased fairly significantly, well over $10 million. The height of the building has gone from 13 stories to a 15-story building. And what that is, it's actually 2 hotels in that building now. Those hotels are the Residence Inn by Marriott and AC Hotels, which is also a Marriott hotel brand. The square footage of commercial and hotel space have obviously increased with that. So what you would see if you're looking at that building, what would be different is when you look at it from the ground, what used to look like 13 stories will actually look like 14 stories. On the very top of the building, there will be a restaurant that you would likely not see from the ground level, and that will be the 15th story. On the front of the building where the retail is, it is added a floor. You're going to see 4 floors plus a rooftop terrace, and that'll include restaurants, some retail. It'll include conference space, hotel pool, and then some terrace space, obviously. So that's the biggest change that you'll see in the building, but overall the concept and design remains very similar. So the city budget. So I'm going to jump down to the bottom line of this budget and just $20.6 million. That's the same budget that we presented before. The overall budget has not changed. It will not change. So when you see items come forward on potentially the consent agenda, it is part of that $20.6 million budget. It's not in excess of that budget, and just want to make sure that's clear for the public. The private investment, So if I start from the top, the ramp construction actually has gone up slightly. We had it at 13.8 million before. It's at 14.1 million. There's a couple things going on there. The first is some of the city contingency items were moved into the actual construction budget. And two, we've gotten bids back that are more accurate as we've gone through the process from our construction manager. And that's the number that we're working on in our GMP right now. Site cost remain the same. The storm sewer remains the same, and it is complete now. And if you'll notice, River Road is open for business again, so traffic is flowing a little better there. And the administrative fees remain the same, and the soft cost for the city have slightly changed. We've gone from 0.9 million to 0.7 million in the city contingency, and those are the funds that we moved. And the design contract has gone from 0.9 up to 1 million. They basically maxed out that contract based on the cost of the project as a whole, and that was in their design contract. So how are we doing? That's kind of the question are we where we should be? Are we spending too much? Are we spending too little on this project? I just want to take a minute to talk about that. I've given you a reference that all the counselors have. It's the parking structure cost outlook for 2018. It's got WGI on the front. Someone at home could Google or search for parking structure cost outlook for 2018, and it's easily available on the internet for reference. It's something that's been used before, but before you may have seen Carl Walker on the top of it. So Carl Walker Parking was actually purchased by WGI, and that's why you see a different name on the top of it. And that's actually different than our parking consulting company, which is Walker Consultants. They are not the same company, so please don't confuse them. So we want to use that to gauge where we're at in our cost. So the first gauge in here is our overall project cost and soft cost. If you look through this article, it will tell you that your soft cost for a project should be in that 15 to 20% range. The more complicated a project would be, the higher the soft cost would be. Our project is extremely complicated, having a public and private entity. There's been a lot of negotiations. There's been a lot of work to get to where we are now, and we would expect it to be at the 20% range. When we look at our project, that 15 to 20% is going to be based on total project construction cost. And when I look at that, I'm going to see approximately $16.3 million in actual construction cost. And we're going to take 15 to 20% of that, and that's going to give us a range of $18.7 to $19.6 million, roughly where that project would be. And obviously our budget's at $20.6 million, and you say, well, there's $1 million difference, where is that? It's pretty simple. If you take out our contingency, because the numbers from the WGI study are completed projects, we have a lot of contingency money still in this project. Our goal is not to spend contingency money, and when we don't spend it, we'll get it back in our parking fund. So if we take out the construction manager contingency, and if we take out the city contingency, that would drop the project cost down to about $19.1 million. That's right in the middle of the range of where we would expect to be in that 18.7 to 19.6. So we are where we are supposed to be. We're kind of right in the middle. We'll get that final number when all costs come in and we finalize the project, but we're where we should be overall as a project cost. The other benchmark in that report is the cost per space. And when you look at that report, we want to make sure we're understanding what we're looking at. When it references cost per space, the only thing it's talking about is literally the construction cost of the ramp. When we look at a total project cost, that's different. The total construction cost for the ramp, we would look at the 14.1 million construction cost, and we should add that micropile cost at 0.8 million. We're really looking at around 14.9 million in actual construction costs when we add that up, and that's about $28,000 per space. Contingency's not added into that yet, but that's kind of where we expect to come in, is in that ballpark. If you look at the report, you'll see a list of prices per space by region, and you'll see Minneapolis, Minnesota on that page too. And the cost is $21,000, roughly $700 per space. So we've always got a discrepancy in those costs. So why would we have a cost discrepancy of $6,700? If you look at it on that same page, it will tell you what that base parking ramp at $21,600, $700 per space entails. And it is your bare bones, stripped down parking ramp. It's like going to the car lot and buying a car with no power windows, no power locks, no power seats, no air conditioning. It's the very base model, and that is not what we're building. We're building a ramp that is actually consistent with and potentially a little above what we have in our other facilities. So what are those additional expenses that we have that are driving that difference? Well, these are the enhanced features. All of these enhanced features come directly out of that report for reference. But the biggest thing that we're paying for is the bigger space. So we are building 9-foot wide parking spaces. We know in South Dakota that people typically have bigger trucks, bigger SUVs, and we're going to use a 9-foot wide space. We could actually probably fit another 25 to 35 parking spaces in that ramp, but we chose to make those parking spaces more accommodating and more user-friendly. The major driver of that cost is the type of construction that we've talked about. We are using post-tension construction. It will lower the overall maintenance cost of that structure over the life of that structure. We know we're going to own this for at least 80 years, potentially longer, and the goal is to keep those costs down. The deep foundation system, those are the micropiles. They're extremely expensive, but they're also extremely safe and conservative foundations. They're one of the more expensive foundations we could put under this building, and that's what's there. And that's actually what's going on right now on site. There's some other stuff there, custom wayfinding and signage. We've actually budgeted for a Daktronics sign on the front of our ramp to help people find it. We're doing that in some of our other ramps actually now. Enclosed stair towers, the facade on the building is an upgraded facade. You're going to see aluminum panels, precast, and precast on the exterior of the building. We'll have a sprinkler system. Obviously, it is a mixed-use development, which costs more to integrate and has some more square footage. And our access control system right now is a pretty expensive access control system, and it is state-of-the-art. So those are the items that are truly driving the overall cost of that ramp. And when you look at it and see what we're paying for, that's what we're paying for, and that's the difference. So where are we at right now on site? We are excavating the site. These are the trench lines where the footings and foundations are going in. You can see it's actually pretty wet. It's been a challenge out there with all the rain recently. And those tubes are actually drilled into the ground until they get to bedrock. And then there's a steel rod and some concrete slump that goes in there that will actually act as the foundation, and they'll have pile caps put on top of them starting this week. In the background, you'll also see a crane pad. So if you see that metal thing standing up kind of in the middle and to the right of the picture on the right, that's actually where the crane will go for construction. So what does the timeline look like going forward? So we've done excavation of micropiles. Those are obviously occurring now. The pile caps start this week, and that's the next major milestone, and you'll see the crane go up at the end of the month. The crane on site will exceed 250 feet. It's going to be an extremely large crane to build this project. So that'll be on site while they finish the pile caps, and in November you'll start seeing post-tension concrete. So think of the concrete that's being framed and poured on site. That's when we'll actually see things start to come out of the ground, and we'll see the kind of the skeleton of that structure. That skeleton of the structure will go from November, and in April it'll hit the level where the hotel will start, and it will continue to be poured all the way up. The entire structure will be a post-tension structure. In May, they'll start putting the siding. These will be precast panels that will go on the side of the building, and they'll start putting that on the exterior of the building. That'll be set with the crane. It'll take probably 6 to 8 weeks to put ours on, and then when they get all of ours on, they'll start putting the hotel development panels on the side of that building. And that'll continue. The hotel shell will be done around August of 2019, once that's done, they'll continue to work on the interior of our parking ramps. So think of electrical work, lighting, life safety systems. Those will go in, and they'll be done approximately November with the parking ramp portion. And you'll see a gap there between November of 19 and approximately February of 2020 when we would open the ramp. That gap is because we'll have a hole in the middle of all of our floors where that crane will go all the way up the building. And so we've got to wait for all of the siding to go on the hotel. Then they will have to take the crane out, disassemble it, and then they'll come back and pour those sections that were not poured previously. So we'll open up in February of 2020, and the hotel will finish in approximately fall of 2020 and open up. So what should we look for on the private developer side? These are all the items, or the major items that are outstanding that our developer will have to provide, and we're working with them to get these items now. The biggest thing, we'll have to see all of their final cost. We have a good idea of where they're at, and that's how we got our budget numbers that we've shown today. And part of that will be showing the evidence that they have debt and financing in place. And that'd be in addition to any personal guarantees that they already have established. The private design plans are almost done. We should have those within the next month, and that would be for the whole project. We'll need to see their payment and performance bond to make sure the building is going to be completed. We'll have evidence of insurance on site. and they actually share the same insurance policy with us, and they'll need to make a payment of 35% before they begin construction. After they begin construction, we'll continue to meet with them on either a bi-weekly basis or potentially a monthly basis. We meet with them every other week now as part of construction meetings. We'll continue to do that and get progress reports. And then before they occupy the building, they'll owe the city another $500,000 to get their building occupancy permit. That covers kind of a brief overview of the entire project. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Neitzer.
Matt, thank you, first of all, for the administration and you representing it, coming out and explaining. I mean, I've been waiting for this for, I think, over a year, explaining this, the cost of the ramp and the cost per space. We have listened to, honestly, dishonest, and I'll just say moronic arguments about it's going to cost double per space, gold-plated ramp, and all of this nonsense. And I've been waiting for the administration to come out and actually rebut this, because we've been trying to do it for I don't know how long. So I really appreciate you taking it head on. Another thing I want to point out is that with, we do have ramps, or maybe a ramp where maybe it was built a little cheaper, and now we're having to keep doing things to it. And so sometimes I think to myself, on the one hand, we're saying we're spending too much on this one, but then if we just cut corners and did a cheap ramp, you'd get bonked over the head for the next 10 years about why are we putting all this money into this thing and repairing it. So sometimes you can't win, but anyway. So I do have one question, though, with that appreciation. The micro piles, so to what extent are the micro piles necessary for just our public ramp portion to work versus the private portion? Meaning, if the private portion wasn't there, would we need micro piles? And is the developer bearing the cost of whatever portion? Because
Right.
that comes up a lot too.
Sure. So the developer's portion of the footings and foundations was based on the appraisal of what they're purchasing. So they are paying for a portion of the foundation system, but that was factored into their purchase price or purchase of air rights. What percentage of that is allocated to their building on top? It's difficult to say, because it's highly likely we would be putting micropiles in this site regardless. So one of the biggest unknowns we always have in construction is what we can't see, which is underground. And we found initially we knew that we might have micropiles. When we started this project, even before the current project was started, the project previous to this, we knew that micropiles were potentially going to go up. So we've kind of planned for them the whole time. And because of the fractured bedrock, is really why we have them. That's what's driving them as a safety factor. Some of the other footing systems potentially could have damaged that bedrock, like an H-pile system, and it would not have been as secure of a building. And basically Geotech has told us, which is our consultant, no, we want you to put micropiles under there. And I don't have an exact yes or no, but I would say most likely yes. I can get that answer. We can talk to them about it and get you a better answer. The other thing is the soils on site are some of them are very poor. Some of the buildings, if you saw the mystery building story that appeared on Kello, when they did a lot of that demolition, they took those buildings, which would not be allowed today, and they pushed them in the basements. And there's a lot of rubble on site. And so that is driving some of our actually cost and soil corrections now. So we're still doing soil corrections on site just for the slab and some of the very base of the first floor wall, but the micropiles basically get us around all of those soil issues for everything that's above. So I would suspect we should have them.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Silver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I concur with Councilor Neitzer. Thank you for being here for the regular updates and keeping out in front of this and keeping us up to date on how things are coming. Can you remind me and remind people watching what the definition is of a soft cost again?
Okay, so soft costs can be basically, they're pretty much anything that's not a construction cost. So you're looking at land acquisition, architectural and engineering fees, and environmental fees, professional consultants, evaluations, design, geotechnical borings, what else? Financing, owner administrative cost, legal cost, and there are other soft costs that we could roll into that, like CMAR fees, South Dakota excise tax. There's just a laundry list, insurance. And the reason they strip all of those out, because you may go to a different state, and in New York, well, maybe you don't pay South Dakota excise tax, you pay no tax, or maybe you pay more tax. So when you pull all those out, it tries to give you a fair comparison across the nation of what the base cost is.
Okay, so we have a pretty good idea what they will be, and we're staying within that budget on that so far.
Yes.
Okay, so when you talk about, you know, like the enhanced features, and we got the Dectronic sign and a lot of these things that look fantastic, but you're saying all in all with the city project and the budget, city budget, everything's staying within the 20.6 million and everything that's been budgeted up till this point, everything's on track?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Terrific. And then final question, the 13 to 15 floors, that's kind of an exciting development. Is this 15th floor restaurant, is this an independent private type restaurant, or is this part of the hotel, a restaurant on top of the hotel, or is this?
My understanding is that it's a private restaurant that you or I could go have dinner at with our families and have incredible views of Sioux Falls and probably Brandon even.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Good to know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions? Counselor Kiley.
Quick follow-up to what Councilor Selberg just asked. He answered the hotel or the restaurant portion of it. What about the other private retail that'll be at the base of this project? Is that also developed and owned by the private developer for the hotel, and then all that space is leased to other retail?
Correct. So there'll be, on the ground floor, there'll be two hotel lobbies that will serve both hotels. As you get above that, you're going to have some conference space, some meeting space. There's going to be a terrace. There'll be multiple restaurants in here, and then there will be some retail that they will develop. Don't know what that is. My only understanding at this point is they have very high interest, and they believe it's going to be sold out.
Okay, thank you. Well, it is going to be a project. It is a project already that is very unique to the city of Sioux Falls, and it's one that's going to be a driving factor to our economy. I'm quite confident to our economy of the entire city, and not just downtown. But my thanks go out to the developer for that extra investment, moving that from 13 to 15 stories. And I find it kind of fascinating, the process of removing the crane. So they're basically building around the crane, and then they'll have to take it out in segments. And that's interesting, because if you're disassembling the crane, what are you going to use to lift it out? Can they use other mobile cranes because they're not lifting the capacity, what they have to lift is less, or just, that process?
I don't know the exact process. I believe they'll use other cranes to help lift portions of it out. Like I said, this is an extremely large crane at 250 plus feet, and my understanding is just taking it down, we'll have to close River Road for several days as they set it down in pieces. So it is quite the process.
It is. It reminds me of a children's book that my parents used to read to me, and I used to read to my children, Mike Mulligan and the Steam Shovel, and how he built himself right into the building himself. But anyway, it was that's a very, very cool process. Thanks for sharing that, as well as everything else.
Counselor Brecky.
Question about the construction bonds. Just explain to me how that works so that the city's interests are protected during the course of construction. Are those in place? As I understand it, they need to be in place before the first shovelful has been dug. Is that all in place, and are our interests protected as the construction occurs?
Yes. So the bonds have been sold. We have the money sitting in a parking account.
I mean the construction bonds. Not the financing for it, but the actual protections, kind of our insurance while it's being built, the construction bonding.
On the city side?
On the city's portion.
I would have to follow up with you and give you a good answer for that. Obviously, I believe that it's Journey Construction we're working with, and they've been in business for over 100 years in Sioux Falls. Very reputable company. It is one of the requirements. I have not followed up on that exactly. We'll see it with the GMP probably, is that? So we'll actually see it with the GMP portion of the ramp from Journey. So I can give you a better answer on
Sure,
that, but I don't.
that's fine.
Have a good answer.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Councilor Kiley.
Not a question, but just a compliment to pass on to Journey Construction for the screen that they have used around the construction site. I mean, construction sites by nature are going to be dirty and unattractive, but at least for this portion of it, it does spruce up the site quite a bit, and I found that very nice. So thank them for that investment.
And that is an upgraded finish. You see the jersey barriers and the screening are above and beyond what you would normally see.
Right. Yes. And I'm sure there's safety factors behind that as well too. So yes. Other than just aesthetics.
Any other questions? I will just add in appreciation, Matt. You are always so prepared. You know this project inside and out. And it's always very impressive that you have the facts in front of us. And so I thank you for your time that you spend on this and coming in front of us and making sure that we have all of our questions answered. It goes a long way. So thank you for that. And thank you for the update. We look forward to having you back in a few months. As always, feel free to reach out if there's any other developments. And thank you. At this time, I will ask if there's any public input on any of the items brought forward. Any public input? Seeing none, we will adjourn, but I want to remind you that land use meeting will start in 10 minutes. Land use starts in 10 minutes, and there's 2 items on their agenda starting in 10 minutes. We are adjourned.